So I have been a proud member of the Grossman Ensemble since its inception in the fall of 2018. And in the ensuing time, we've premiered, as Sean alluded just a minute ago, or shall I say 10 minutes ago, if I did my math correctly, about 61 new works. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the 62nd. On December 5th, 2019, during the first cycle of our second season, standing right over there, Augusta Read Thomas, during a rehearsal break, kind of leaned over to me and said, and she asked me in a way that seemed really spontaneous at the time, if I'd like to write a work for this ensemble. And I was taken aback, and with spontaneous elation in equal measure, and without missing a beat, because I'm a percussionist, I said yes. And I immediately grabbed my journal, and I went outside the building, even though it was December and it was cold, and I wrote down what had just happened so that I could remember that date. And I was elated for the rest of the day, and the rest of the rehearsal certainly, and probably for the next couple of weeks, but I would say within about 13 days, I started to understand that what I had gotten myself into, where I had placed myself, was in the bullseye of some really unfamiliar territory. You see, I'm a percussionist and an educator first, and I'm a composer in a really distant third. So I knew that if I was going to write a piece for this fantastic ensemble, that I was going to have to set aside some time. And thanks to the generosity of Northern Illinois University, where I teach, where I've been teaching for the past 2 decades, I applied for and was given a sabbatical leave during the fall semester of this current academic year. And I want to take just a minute to publicly thank my unstoppable sabbatical coverage team, Mr. Ben Walland and Ms. Rachel Taylor. If you're here, I salute you and all that you stand for. Thank you so much. I began that sabbatical period traveling with my wife through her native Brazil for a good couple of weeks. We performed together on an international chamber music festival, and then we took a couple of days of really needed vacation. And then I continued on for a couple of weeks in Brazil, reconnecting with my Afro-Brazilian capoeira community. And when I came back to the United States in early September and went to be with my wife in Texas, I began staring at a blank page of manuscript paper, and the full weight of self-inflicted pressure came upon my shoulders. And so for the good couple of days, I puddled around the house, and I mowed the lawn, and I tended to the garden, and I cleaned the garage, and just about everything else that you could possibly do while thinking, oh my God, what am I gonna do? And when I came back to that piece of manuscript paper, I wrote down the following sentence, a question really. Where to begin writing for this unique ensemble featuring 13 incredible musicians? And in the act of writing that question down, I began obsessing about the number 13. For many years, I've been an avid fan of the music of Steve Reich, and in particular, his masterwork from 1976, Music for 18 Musicians, is just an incredible piece of music that's had an indelible imprint on my musical sensibility, let's say. And so in an unoriginal move, the working title for this piece for a good couple of months was Music for 13 Musicians. Really cute. But Reich's incredible magic carpet ride of a composition really sort of sparked some ideas, and I began writing them down. And I thought to myself, well, okay, 13 musicians. I could write 13 harmonies. They could be 13th chords. The piece would be 13 minutes long. It might have 13 sections. It might be in palindromic 13/8 meter, 3 + 2 + 3 + 2 + 3. And even the spirit of Babaluaye, the Afro-Cuban deity or Orisha of sickness and of healing, whose numerical symbol is 13, came to my mind. And simultaneously, I began musing about other 13 isms that went well beyond the borders of musical content. According to statistics kept by the Otis Elevator Company, for every high-rise in the United States that has a named 13th floor, there are another 6 that skip from the 12th to the 14th. And according to international financial statistics, every year that the Friday the 13th rolls around the calendar, income and revenue plummets around the globe, particularly in the Western Hemisphere. We have a name for this in the West. It's called triskaidekaphobia, right? Fear of 13. But what is that all about? And what is that all about really, you know? Perhaps it is attributable to Judas Iscariot, the infamous 13th guest at the Last Supper of Christ. Perhaps it has to do with a European-American intention to oppress indigenous American cultures who followed the passing of each calendar year by following the 13 moons. Or perhaps, closer to home, it's related to a fear of the United States having passed the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which abolished slavery in the land. Thanks to excellent recent research in artistry on the part of authors like Isabel Wilkerson and film directors like Ava DuVernay, whose film 13th is absolutely incredible, we know full well that in a post-13th America, there is a tremendous amount of backlash against our brothers and sisters of African American descent. You see, irrational fear can turn deadly at a moment's notice. Whereas 12 confers comforting presence with its seeming perfection, 12 hours twice daily, 12 months in the calendar that we follow, 12/8 meter in music, which shows up all the time. 13 is one step beyond that comfort. Without spending time within the contours of 13, it remains unknown, it remains uncomfortable. The sabbatical that I mentioned was magical for me for another really simple reason, in that it allowed my wife and I to live daily together for a good couple of months. And one day, as I was relaying 12's seeming perfection and 13's fraught significance with my wife, she stopped and said, "No, Greg, 13 is one more than perfection. It's like a baker's dozen. 13 is a sign of abundance." And that ray of sunshine stayed with me like a meditation throughout the writing of this piece. You see, because love always conquers fear. So in Wilkersonian fashion, my piece Amending 13 is a hopeful prayer offering. And it's an invitation. It is an invitation that involves the African mbira, the Afro-Brazilian berimbau, the Afro-Cuban bata, and the African-American drum set, 4 instruments with which I have developed a really deep relationship over the course of my music making. This music is more than simply a way to say Black Lives Matter. This is a piece that plays Black Lives Matter. And for all of us, and all of you, this is an invitation to dance in 13 like you've never danced it before. Because, after all, a good sweat might just break away through the feverish nonsense of irrational fear that keeps each of us from being our best selves. Along the path of this compositional adventure, 4 composers provided me with incredible insight and guidance, and I want to thank them publicly. Kirsten Soriano from the University of North Texas, Alexis Lamb, who's finishing up her doctoral work at the University of Michigan, Clay Mettens, who's right here at the University of Chicago, and David M. Gordon, also an alum of the University of Chicago, who taught for several years at Wheaton College and now is a colleague of mine at Northern Illinois University. Indeed, fortifying these personal relationships along the process of making this piece of music has been transformative for me. And in the words of my dear teacher and mentor, Stephen Schick, we should expect nothing less from a life in music than the development of powerful tools for personal transformation. So in closing, I want to thank all of you for being here. In particular, I want to thank my students, and my friends, and my family for being here tonight. And in particular, for the gift of this incredible opportunity that I've been given, I want to thank Dr. and Mrs. Nava Grossman for this incredible musical garden of delights that bears your name. I want to thank Gusty for believing me enough to ask me to write this piece. And I want to thank David, and I want to thank my 12 colleagues for your incredible musicianship, for your friendship, for your feedback, and for the joy that you bring to my life each and every time we get together to play some music. So, without further ado, this is Amending 13, a sign of abundance.